Okay, so good morning, everyone. So this is your chapter 2 in your biochemistry, which is entitled as General Properties of Aqueous Solution. So let us first know about the objective of this chapter. So the student should be able to the following. The first one here is to identify the different properties of water. So what will be the properties of water? So one of those that we knew about the water is a universal solvent. Okay, aside from that, what will be the properties of water? Okay, number two here is to explain how water can act both acid and base. Okay, so as we knew in your pH level or in your scale, I knew that this acid and base was already discussed in your general chemistry, okay, in your chemical reaction. So water, which is in between the acid and the base with a uh, a neutral neutral pH. Okay, so it says here that your water can act both acid and a base. Okay, describe the four macromolecules. As we all knew that there are four macromolecules which are present inside our body, which are needed inside our body. And these are your nucleic acids, which the DNA and then the RNA found. Okay, the second one is your lipid, which is the necessary to for insulation. The third one is carbohydrate, which is the source of energy, and then the fourth one, which is a protein. It is used to repair muscle and tissue. And then the last one is to justify if water is universal solvent. Okay, so this is your experiment, which means that the discussion of our lecture hanggang number 3 lang. So let's start with of what is how important water in our life. So this is your introduction in your second chapter or in your second topic in your biochemistry. There are, based on this graph, okay, based on this graph, water area almost 70.9%. Okay, this is how huge ang water area. This is how water is essential for life. And your land area is only 29.1%. How about in human body? So in our human body, ganun din siya. 60% of our human body needs water. How important is water inside our body? Diba? In the case of if you are dehydrated, so like for example, through perspiration, even through talking, okay? So we expelled water through saliva. So it needs to drink a lot of water. It says that 6 to 8 glasses every day because our body needs water, which is 60% of water needs by the human body. Water is the most abundant compound which is found in the universe, made up of 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. As we knew that the formula or the molecular formula of your water is H2O. H2 means there are 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. So this is how your water. Okay, 2 atoms of hydrogen, which is H2, and then 1 atom of oxygen, which is O or oxygen, stands for oxygen. Let us first review what are the 4 types of chemical bonds. So in other sources, in your Google, there are only 3. The third one is what we call the metallic bonds. I hear this, one of my students in biochem, sa inyong batch. Okay, so sa ibang Googles, I found this 4. Okay, so the first one here is your ionic bonds. So as we all knew, that when you say ionic bonds, meron siyang metal and then the non-metal, the positive and then the negative side, the negative charges. So like for example, in the case of sodium chloride, your sodium with a positive charge and your chlorine with a negative charge. So they combine the sodium and chlorine to form sodium chloride. Okay? So ang kanilang chemical bond na ginamit sa ionic bond is what you call the is the other one is losing and then the other one is accepting. So nagdo-donate yung isa and then the other one is accept. Based on this picture, okay, so kasi kung titingnan natin in your previous lesson, is that about your um the first shell, diba? The first shell of this is made up of, in your electron configuration, made up of 2 electrons. And on the second shell, made up of 8 electrons dapat. The electrons are found out of the nucleus, and then the protons and neutrons found inside the nucleus. Okay, so based on this example, if you notice this one, the atom 1 made up of 1 electron. I think this is based on this example. So the atom 1 made up of 1 electron. And then the atom 2 made up of 2, 4, 6, 7 electrons. Okay? So ito ay example lang. Okay? Kasi I think in pag-combination na kasi it is not. Because the first shell ay meron siya dapat 2. Okay? Makikita natin siguro sa lesson natin pagkatapos nito. Okay? On your non-metal, meron siyang 7 electrons. So since the shell needs 8 electrons, so here in your ionic molecule, this atomic one gives or donates 1 electron to the atom 2. So this is how. So ito yung red dot, which came from your metal 1 or the atom 1. So magta-transfer siya, magdo-donate siya ng 1 electron to the atom 2 to make this second atom to make it 8. So that is what you call ionic molecule. The one donates and then the other one accepts. That is what you call the ionic bond. When you say covalent bonds, okay, the atoms bonded by sharing electrons. They share each other. One of this example is water. Okay, it says that water is a polar covalent bonds. Sa ibang sources yon. Pero tinanggal ko yung covalent bonds. Why? Kasi yung third dito is about the hydrogen bonds. Okay, it's sinabi ko lang is that water is a polar molecule. Malalaman natin yon of what is polar and non-polar. In your water, look at this. In the first shell, okay, there are 2. Okay, there are 2 electrons. Okay, there are 2 electrons. And then the third one, ay meron siyang 2, 3, 4, 6 electrons. This is under the oxygen. Your oxygen is with an atomic number of 8. Diba? The atomic number of your oxygen is 8. Since the first shell needs 2 electrons, which means that you have to subtract this atomic number, which is 8, into the 2 electrons na nilagay on the first shell. So ang natitira na lang talaga on the second shell is 6. Okay? Para ma-complete yung second shell, which is necessarily to complete, kailangan niyang, ang second shell ay meron siyang 8. This 2 hydrogen ay dumikit dito on the last shell of this oxygen. Why? Because this oxygen needs 2 electrons. And this hydrogen, since the first shell needs 2 electrons, your hydrogen only 1 electron. Why? Because the atomic number of your hydrogen is 1. So anong gagawin? Didikit ngayon yung hydrogen sa inyong shell, sa last shell ng oxygen, these 2 hydrogen. Anong mangyayari? The last portion, okay, the 1 electron from your oxygen ay didikit, ay mag-share siya ng isang electron with your hydrogen. This hydrogen, the shell magiging complete, which is 2 electrons. How about with your oxygen? Since your oxygen needs 2 electrons, dumikit ngayon ang hydrogen on the last shell of this oxygen. So this hydrogen shared ng electron niya, which is 1, and then another 1 hydrogen shared another electron to oxygen to make this last shell complete. So magiging 8 ngayon. Walang naglo-lose, walang nagdo-donate, walang nag-accept. Each one of them shared electrons. That is the reason why in the definition of covalent bond, it says that the atoms bonded by sharing electrons. They shared each other. That is the reason why pag nakita mo that the water is a covalent bond. But tinanggal ko yung covalent bond? Because, why? Kasi may nakita akong isang reference na hindi niya sinama yung covalent bond. Ang sinaba niya lang is that water is a polar molecule. Okay? So later malalaman natin what's the difference between polar and non-polar. Okay. The third one, chemical bond, is what you call the hydrogen bonds. So metallic bonds sa iba, sa akin is that ang nakuha ko is about the hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonds, hydrogen attracts and bonds to neighboring negative charges. Look at this, the examples that I have. Your water made up of hydrogen. Okay, your water and ammonia comparison, they are made up of hydrogens. Your ammonia with a molecular formula of NH3, which means 1 atom of nitrogen and 3 atoms of hydrogen. Okay, how about when you say hydrogen fluoride? Okay, ito yun siya. Composed of fluorine and then hydrogen, made up of hydrogen also. While your methanol, made up of hydrogen also. Okay, so isinama yung hydrogen bonds kasi not all with hydrogen made up are under ng covalent bonds. Kaya meron talaga siyang sariling bond. And that is what we call the hydrogen bonds. And then the fourth one here is the van der Waals interactions. Ano yung van der Waals interaction? This is an intermolecular interaction. Do not involve covalent bonds or ions or ionic bonds. So which means walang naglo-lose, walang naglo-donate, walang nag-share. Okay? So this atomic one and then this atomic two magko-combine. Okay? What happened? Okay? In your step 2, atoms are polarized and attract one another. They attract each other. Walang magbibigay. There is an attraction between them. Okay, walang magbibigay. And that is the fourth chemical bonds. That is the reason why in your next slide, I said that water is a polar molecule. It is not a polar covalent molecule or covalent bond. Why? Because your water made up of hydrogen. How about the hydrogen bonds? Diba? Saan naman yun? Hindi siya nalagay. And this water is polar molecule because when you say polar, which means that there is hydrophilic, okay, they love water. Okay, the sides of this molecule, this water, the sides of this are hydrophilic, and then the other side, which is hydrophobic, or they are fear of water. It says here that water is a polar molecule because it has regions of positive and negative charges. Okay, ang water natin kasi meron siyang positive and negative charges. And water also made up of covalent bonds as they bind each other with hydrogen bonds. Okay, as I have said, your water made up of what? Of hydrogen. That is the reason why that I never mentioned that in general, it is under the covalent bond because there is another chemical bond, which is what you call the hydrogen bond. Molecules or even different regions of the same molecule, they fall into general classes. Depends on how they attract with each other. In your cell membrane, okay, there is side na merong hydrophilic and then there is side which is what you call the hydrophobic. Ito nyo makikita mamaya what is polar and non-polar in your cell membrane. When you say hydrophilic, they love water. There is a side of cell membrane which is pwedeng ma-touch into water. Kasi ang ating cell membrane ay meron siyang side na may water content. And the inner side of this ay merong non-water content, which is under the hydrophobic side or water-fearing, which means hindi pwedeng maka-attach doon ang water because there fear. Okay? What is the function of your cell membrane? As I have said before, your cell membrane is the one, it is the gatekeepers. This is the one that controls a semi-permeable membrane that controls, okay, that controls the substances ions enter into the cell. And this cell membrane contains water. Diba? The human body needs 60% of water. Outside of the cell membrane, there is a presence of water. And the inside of the cell membrane ay meron siyang water. And this one is what we call the cell membrane. Ang cell membrane yung ay ginawa siyang, there is a polar heads, this one, para siyang tadpoles, kung napapansin nyo. Ang tails ay nasa gitna. That is what we call the non-polar tails. Ang lahat ng tails ng tadpole ay nasa gitna ng cell membrane. At yung mga itlog nito na tinatawag na polar head, ay yun ang naka-attach sa water. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo that when you say polar, they are hydrophilic. They love water. So they are polars. But when you say non-polar, they are hydrophobic, which means they are fear of water. Kaya nga nasa gitna sila. Okay? And this lipid bilayer ay nasa gitna. Okay. So, titingnan natin yan in your lipids. Why this lipids is insoluble in water. So, makikita nyo yan yung picture ng inyong cell membrane na ino. Let us first know about the properties of water. Aside from water is a universal solvent, or there are more substances, hindi siya sinabi class na all substances dissolve in water. Why? Because there are some substances na hindi pa rin kayang i-dissolve sa water. So, yun ang sa inyong mga incoming pang inyong mga modules or chapters. It says here that the first property of water is that water is a universal solvent, which means it is there are more substances dissolved in water. For example, sugar and water. Kung napapansin nyo, pag sinistir nyo, okay, nagiging homogeneous. Di ba with your previous lesson, it says about the heterogeneous and then the homogeneous. So malalaman nyo na lang there is a presence of water because matamis. Okay. The second one is what we call the cohesions and adhesions. So if water attracts to another water, it is what we call the cohesion. So which means it is about the liquid and liquid, and that is what you call cohesion. Okay, but if water attracts with another substance, it is called adhesions, which means it is about the water and then the substance, and that is what you call the adhesion. The third one here is what high surface tension. One of the properties of water is that the molecules of water are small, so they move very fast. Okay? So, molecules ng water daw ay maliliit. The fourth is high heat capacity, which is water is able to absorb heat before the temperature increases in order to maintain the body temperature. Yun yung, yan yung one of the properties of water. Like for example, the seawater. Diba? Pag nagliligo kayo, kahit nasikatan ng sun yan. Ha? Okay? One of the property of water is high heat capacity. Kaya niyang absorb into heat. And because of this, it maintains the body temperature. It maintains the temperature of the sea. Changes in density. Density is small over volume. As water heated or cold, the density changes. So like for example, pag ang water, ilalagay mo siya sa mataas na volume ng water, what happened? Tataas ang kanyang temperature. Okay? But this water, pag nilagay mo siya sa room temperature, galing sa sobrang init, ano ba? It diffuse. And because of this diffusion, humina yung init. Diba? Pag nagsi-steam inhalation kayo, what happened? Sa unang kasagsagan ng heat, sobrang init. But if this heat exposed, ano nangyayari? It cool. So, ibig sabihin, nawawala or nadi-diffuse yung init. And because of that, water changes in density. What does water needs to do to be an acid or a base? Ano gagawin ng water? If water mixed with an acid, water accepts hydrogen ions and acts as a base. Pag ang water daw, kasi di ba neutral, pag ikinumbine mo siya sa acid, it acts as a base. Teacher, hindi naman nangyayari. Okay, why? Because it is base. So meron akong ginawa nito na lesson kasi I am one of the tutor in 4.0. One of the students complained about this. Na hirap daw siya to understand about this. Ako kasi pag gumawa, meron siyang nagiging quantitative siya na nagpapakita that this water, okay, this water, if combines to something, ginagamitan ko siya ng pH level. But pag qualitative kasi class, it depends on this Bronsted-Lowry acid base. It says here that any substance that donates, once na nag-donate na yung proton, like for example, the water donates hydrogen, nagbibigay siya dun sa acid, this proton, any substance that donates sa proton, pag nagdo-donate or nagbibigay na siya ng proton, that is what we call the acid. So once na nagbigay ang ating water ng hydrogen or proton into a substance, it is an acid. But if this water accepts protons, okay, it is a base. Okay, so you have to depend your analysis in your Bronsted-Lowry acid base under the qualitative. Why is it says that water can be an acid or a base? So it says here, if water mixed with an acid, ang water nag-accept ng hydrogen ions. Okay. So pag once na nag-accept na, this water becomes a base. If water mixed with a base, which means that water donates or gives hydrogen, this water becomes an acid. Okay? Why? Because according to Bronsted-Lowry acid or a base, if something or a substance, it donates a proton, it becomes an acid. That is the reason why this water becomes acid if it donates hydrogen. If a substance accepts proton, then it is a base. This is the reason why that water mixed with an acid, if this water is mixed with an acid, so it accepts hydrogen, so ang acid ay nagiging base. Alalahanin niyo that the water is neutral. Okay, example, ang gastric juice. If this gastric juice or hydrochloric acid mixed with water, okay, it acts as a base. Why? Because this water accepts hydrogen from hydrochloric acid. If water mixed with a base, one of the example na base, like for example, Zonrox or Clorox, they're considered as a base. Di ba ang pH level nila mataas? So this water, it gives hydrogen ions. And since the water donates hydrogen, this water becomes a base, becomes an acid. Okay? Basta tatandaan, if the substance donates, that is an acid. If the substance accepts, it is a base. According to Lowry, I can't pronounce it with Bronsted-Lowry acid or base. There are 4 macromolecules in biochemistry, as I have said. These are protein, the lipid, the nucleic acid, and then the other one, which is the carbohydrates. Each of these macromolecules ay meron siyang discussion with your module, with your syllabus. Okay, that is the reason why I arrange your syllabus, because I don't want na nasa scatter. Gusto ko nagsama-sama sila para hindi siya magulo. Kung ang lesson natin ay about carbohydrates, dapat carbohydrates lang. Ang gagawin natin is about the, if masyadong malalim, and then I place it sa dulo. Okay? So I have different references from different schools. I think, ang isa ko tinignan is about Lasal, kung paano nila ginawa ang syllabus under the biochemistry. because biochem is important among psychology students. This is a foundation. Okay? I think may tinignan pa akong syllabus from the from other countries, and then I saw this na ito ang lesson under the chair na matutunan ng mga estudyante. So your protein, this is the molecular structure of protein. So ito yung sinasabi ko na that your protein with the presence of nitrogen, carbon, and hydrogen. As we all know, as we all knew that macromolecules, they are under the organic chemistry. Because pag carbon, with carbon contains, that is organic. So your protein made up of hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and oxygen. Okay, so meron siyang amino group and then the carboxylic group. Okay, so that is what you call the protein. This is an amino acid, which is this protein made up of amino group and then made up of carboxyl group. Okay, while this R group and hydrogen atom is attached to the central carbon atom. So ito yung nakikita nyo that this your R group is attached to this carbon and this hydrogen. Ito yung nasa gitna. Okay, your R is attached to your carbon and then your hydrogen. Okay, here this R group can be either another hydrogen atom, functional hydroxide ion, or hydrocarbon chain. This R group is specific to an amino acid. For example, when R group is a hydrogen atom, so kung siya ay hydrogen atom, di ba ang R group ay either hydrogen atom or functional group. Okay, then this amino acid is known as your glycine. Okay, so medyo malalim na yan ang ating protein, and I think yun ay di-discuss under your proteins. Lipid, the monomer of your lipid is fatty acid with the molecular structure of this. So this is about the lipid made up of saturated and unsaturated fatty acid. So let us discuss this one by one in your lipid parts. Okay, so kung titingnan nyo, meron siyang oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. So yung CHO, the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen ay present in your biomolecules. Carbohydrates, the monomer of this is glucose, but sometimes ay na-mention ang fructose and then the galactose. They're called as monomers also. But in general, ang pinaka-well-known talagang monomer of carbohydrates is glucose. So, and with the molecular structure of this. Okay, so the molecular formula of your glucose is C6H12O6. So pag C6, which means it is made up of 6 carbons. So there are 6 here, and then C6H12. So there are 12 hydrogen, and then C6H12O6, and there are 6 oxygen. So yun yung kanyang molecular structure. So kung titingnan niyo ang carbohydrates made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the fourth one is what you call the nucleic acid. The monomer of this is nucleotide. So meron kayong lesson talaga na belong to nucleic acid, nucleotide, and then heredity. Papasok doon ng DNA kasi under the heredity. So ang lesson, I think it's about 2 weeks. Okay, kasi ang heredity ay hiniwalay ko. And then your nucleic acids and nucleotides ay nakaseparate para step by step natin siyang aaralin. Okay? Then, your nucleic acids, ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, kaya nga nakita ko because of this nitrogenous bases, nitrogen, okay, meron siyang nitro or nitrogen, your nucleic acids made up of carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, and hydrogen. And thank you for that person na mamang nucleic acid po, made up of nitrogen. Kasi yung previous kong na-read lang talaga class, that is the reason why ang teaching ay non-stop ang reading. Okay? So, yun nga, because of that nitrogenous bases which are present in your nucleic acids, may nitrogen content talaga ang nucleic acids. And thank you for that person na nag-correct sa akin. Okay, so these are the references. I know there are a lot of references na nakuha ako pa. Pero dahil I want to finish this chapter 2, ito lang nailagay ko talaga. Okay, sorry that hindi ko nagawa yung modules kasi because of the references medyo magulo, naghahabol ako ng aking lesson. Gusto ko matapos na to on your okay, sa inyong ganitong lesson. Okay? So that is the end of our of your module 2 on your third week.